Welcome back, everybody. This is presentation 8 or session 8, and now we're going to be talking about selecting a topic and designing a research question. Some of this actually we've talked about previously, but we're going to get into it a little bit more. As always, review your to-do list. Make sure you're completing all the activities and handing in any of the assignments that are due this session. And you can review your learning objectives on your own. So up to this point, we really have been discussing how to write a good research question. Remember that a PICO statement is a great way to break out or break down the research question. But what makes a research topic a good topic? Since you're going to be spending a lot of time with your research questions and your research topic, it should be something that interests you and something that you would enjoy researching. If you don't like lab work, then don't plan a research topic around lab work. If you're not comfortable in a community setting, then you should not be planning your work in a community setting. It should be something that interests you and that you're comfortable doing. Your topic should also be creative and unique. You want your work to fill a gap in the research. You want to look for research that hasn't been conducted but needs to be conducted. So you want to stay on top of the literature as research is always changing. Be sure that your research will help provide a solution to a problem. Think about who will benefit from your research. Also think about how long it will take. The last thing is very important. Don't plan a 3-year research study if you need to graduate within a year. Make sure your project is time sensitive and doable within your constraints. So here's an activity. I want you to do a little brainstorming. And you may find in this process that it's easy or good for you to write your ideas out on index cards or even just write them in a list on a piece of paper. So the purpose of the exercise is to get you to start to think about your research topic. So brainstorm ideas for your research topic, write them down on your paper or your index cards. Be sure to write down all of the ideas that interest you. And then after writing them down, I want you to lay all your cards or look at your paper and see if there's a link between any of these items. I've actually done this activity by simply writing down variables on different index cards, and then I try to link the cards in a way to form a research question. So, where do research problems come from? Well, they generally come from reading the literature. That is, reading a lot of literature. Only after you have read all about a topic area will you have a sense of what you may do or what you may need to do within that topic. Research ideas can also come from talking with colleagues. A colleague or peer even may have a recommendation or may have thoughts about work that they've done or work that needs to be done. So don't forget to talk with colleagues, talk with peers, even talking with your mentor and advisor about research topics can be helpful. Mentors and advisors can really also help refine your topic area. They generally have experience in doing this. Keep in mind that your research question should be important. It needs to make an impact and it needs to move the literature in a particular field forward. Your research question should also be answerable. That means you can actually test it. And finally, the research question should be feasible. It needs to be doable. You have to be able to conduct this type of research. You need to think about your target population. And your target population is not just those who would be eligible to participate in the study. It would be all the people who will ultimately receive the benefit of the results. Therefore, your target audience must be specific and take into account all relevant factors related to the study. The target audience must be easily identifiable, so clear, and include all possible factors complete. Variables are the building blocks of the research question and what you're testing. Previously, we've talked about variables, so I'm not going to go into length on this particular slide, but you can take a look at this. And also, you want to make sure that within your research question, you're including independent and dependent variables. Remember, independent variables are also known as predictive variables, and these variables cause or predict an outcome. It's possible to have more than one independent variable. In fact, you can have many. Think back to factorial design and remember that independent variables can have more than one level. For example, if an independent variable is the amount of TV watched, it could be 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, etc. Dependent variables are also known as the outcome. This is what changes in response to the independent variable. All right, let's do another activity. Think back to the PICO statement that you developed in a previous session, so earlier. Based on what we just reviewed, do you need to or want to revise your statement? So take a minute and think about that. Another important part of putting together your research question is also thinking about your research rationale. The best way to explain the research rationale is generally in a pictorial map that shows how each variable is arranged in relationship to each other. The rationale explains all the mechanisms involved with the research question. So let's take a look at an example. This is actually my conceptual map from my dissertation work. The model pictorially describes how each of the variables impact the other. So here I was looking at the impact of CBPR, which is an acronym for Community-Based Participatory Research. I was also looking at technology, food literacy programs for adolescents. In turn, I looked at the impact of a food literacy program for adolescents on nutrition-related outcomes, including nutrition knowledge, attitudes, and behavior. Finally, I looked at how the outcomes may be related or may influence each other. So you can see how and where variables overlap and how I'm looking at the direction of it. So I was looking at how CBPR and technology within a food literacy program can impact these nutrition-related outcomes. Drawing out your rationale in the form of a conceptual map can be helpful in visualizing what you mean. So now we have our research question and the rationale. These two items give us an overview of what we will be studying. The research objectives help us describe the purpose of the study and what the study will accomplish. Objectives can be presented in a number of ways. For example, they can be descriptive, presented as guiding questions or specific aims, or they can be presented in terms of a hypothesis and they can predict the relationship between variables. Let's take a look at some examples. So this is an example of a specific aim and a working hypothesis. This was for a pretend grant I wrote in a class, and it was really a grant for providing food safety training for young adults. So the specific aim here is young adults increase their knowledge, change their attitudes, and increase their practices of good food safety behaviors when presented with food safety information, tips, and resources via computer and mobile technology. The working hypothesis was that increasing access to food safety information and resources through the use of computer and mobile technology will increase the acceptance, use, and implementation of information, which will in turn increase knowledge, change negative attitudes, and decrease unsafe food safety practices. Whew, a lot of words. But through this, you get a sense of what the objectives are of the program and how we're going to achieve that. Here's another specific aim. In this specific aim, young adults exposed to food safety information via technology-driven programs will increase their knowledge, change their attitudes, and increase their practices of good food safety behaviors more than students exposed to food safety via traditional classroom instruction. And the working hypothesis for this specific aim was that using generationally appropriate technology will further increase the acceptance and use of food safety information more than a traditional classroom program. So again, you can get a sense of what's going on here, that we're going to be doing a comparison study between two methods of instruction. So take a minute and read this paragraph and see if you can identify the research question and the objectives. I'll give you the answers on the next page, but stop it here and just take a minute to review it. The research question is, do weight loss programs that use cell phones as the tool for delivery lead to weight loss in adolescents who are obese or overweight as measured by BMI or BMI Z-score? So that's what's underlined in blue. And then the objective here is to assess and synthesize the literature on weight loss programs for obese or overweight adolescents aged 12 to 18 years who utilize cell phones as a tool to reduce weight, as measured by BMI or BMI Z-score. I realize in this description I actually use the term goal instead of objective, and technically goal is different from an objective. This write-up that you're looking at here is actually from a systematic review I wrote that's published in Nutrition Reviews. And looking back, I should have used the term objective instead of goal. Okay, so we often see the term hypothesis in studies. Remember, a hypothesis is a statement that predicts the relationship between variables and tells us what the study will test. A hypothesis must be testable and should be based on sound research methods. A hypothesis should be developed based on what is known about a topic. This can also be developed based on exploratory studies where we begin to see an association between variables. The hypothesis then predicts what will happen based on the information we know and deductive and inductive reasoning. A hypothesis should be SMART, which is an acronym for specific, measurable, action-oriented, relevant, and time-bound. Specific means that the hypothesis should be specific and related to the topic that's under study. Measurable means the hypothesis must be able to be measured. You must have a way of capturing the information or measuring the information. Action-oriented means there is some type of change in the study. You are looking for an increase or a decrease. You're looking for something to happen. Relevant means the hypothesis is relevant to the problem. And time-bound means there's a time period in which this hypothesis is going to take place. When using statistical analysis, you're testing to see if you are accepting or rejecting the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis states that there will be no change or no relationship between variables. For example, we accept the null hypothesis that there is no statistically significant difference between the means of two measures, or we reject the null hypothesis when there is a difference in the means of two measures. We're going to talk more about statistics in the coming session, so don't get overwhelmed with that. For this activity, select a paper within your topic area and find the objectives. Look at the wording used to clarify the objectives. Well, you can't copy the wording when you do your own write-up. The more you become familiar with the language generally used to write research questions, specific aims, or objectives, the easier it will get to write this section of your paper. This is where I'm going to stop and end this presentation. Be sure to read the chapters, complete any assignments and activities, check the course schedule and topic outline to make sure there aren't any additional assignments that are due. And as always, if you have any questions about anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to help. Talk to you all soon.